Good morning, I'm Pastor Kevin Bean, and this is First Century Church, located in Mountain View, Missouri. Today we have a sort of a testimonial message for you. The title of this message is Facing Impossible Odds Against You. Now I know that everybody has faced some impossible odds. Today we're going to talk about something called a crisis of belief. And I'm going to explain what that is. Crisis of belief is when something happens to you that is out of the ordinary, usually something that you don't want to have to face, but you're going to have to face it anyway, whether you want to or not. It seems like it's impossible for you to go through what you're going to go through. You may be frightened. A lot of different situations calling for a crisis of belief. But you reach that stage once you get through the problem, and you make it through. You reach a point where you have to say to yourself, what just happened supernaturally. And there's no way that I could have done that on my own. That I had some kind of help supernaturally. And it causes you to ask the question, is there a God or is there not? Some people will take this crisis of belief and say, well, it was fate, it was luck, it was this, it was that. Good people, people who are called by God, people who have a heart for Jesus Christ, people who want to know God. Usually it's people who are poor, people who are down on their luck, people who are down on whatever. Turn to Christ. They believe at that moment that they were helped by the Almighty. And so they search Him out. They make a decision that they're going to be close to God and they're going to get to know God through this crisis of belief that they've just been through. There are certain points and times in our lives, usually not just one but many, that cause us to reach a crisis of belief. And today I'm going to share some stories with you that are difficult for me to share. And I don't want to really have to do this. But I know that this is what the Lord wants me to do. I knew one day it was coming. And today happens to be the day. So let us get started. When I was born, I was immediately adopted. My father was a police officer. My mother was a stay-at-home mother. And we lived out in the country in a farmhouse. And it was nice out there. And I guess we had a pretty good time living on this farm. We had a big garden. I remember as far back as I can remember living on this farm. And we had many bikes that we rode out in the fields, and we enjoyed our lives. And then my mother and father decided that they wanted to move out of this farmhouse and move into the suburbs. So we packed up. My mom and dad bought a house, put a down payment on a home, and we moved into a subdivision on little less than 1 acre lots. Of course, that was a lot different than what we were used to because we had lots of ground out where we were at. free to roam, free to go. And so now we're living one house next to another. I noticed a change in my parents over a short amount of time. And to make a long story short, it was probably the worst mistake of their whole lives by moving away from this little farmhouse where we were happy. My mom and dad started to become cruel, very cruel, towards me, especially because I was the oldest. I don't remember how old I was when we moved to this farmhouse. I was probably in the 4th grade. My brother would have been in the 3rd grade. I remember having a long list of things that I had to do. I remember that before we went to school, we had chores that we had to do, besides getting ready for school and getting ourselves up to the school bus. I remember when we came home from school, we had a long list of chores that we had to do before my mother got home from work. By then she was working in the city as a secretary to the president of Coldwell Banker Realty. We had to vacuum floors, we had to do dishes, we had to start cooking, we dusted, we got clothes out of the dryer from downstairs, and we did the ironing, all of the ironing, including socks, underwear, everything. They had to be perfect. Perfect. I even learned how to iron pleated skirts. I ironed all my dad's uniforms, ties, you name it. And I remember my mother would come home from work, and anytime that she would actually put on a white glove, and she would go through the house and she would check different places. She would look at the carpet. She would look at the meal. She would look at the ironing. She would look at whatever we had to do that day. And if there was a mistake, then I had to start over again. Do it again. Until it got to be done perfect. And once it was done to her satisfaction, she then allowed me to go outside or watch television for a half an hour. During that half an hour, she would finish cooking, do whatever she had to do in the house, and we would come in and eat. Now, my mother tried her best to cook, but she cooked things that I necessarily didn't like. And when you're in 4th, 5th grade, your mom and dad's always going to serve something that you don't like. Most parents will have you try it. And if you don't eat it, you know, they'll excuse you from the table. Well, I didn't like red beets and I didn't like asparagus. My mom didn't use seasoning when she cooked. And if I didn't finish what was on my plate, I had to sit there until about 11 or 12 o'clock at night until it was done, or until I had cleaned my plate. And some of this food would make me gag, as I hated it so bad. If I didn't finish it and she was tired and wanted to go to bed, she put it in the refrigerator and I got it for breakfast the next day. And if I didn't finish it for breakfast, I got it for dinner the next day. Until I ate it. About a week later, of course, that same menu would roll around again. We'd go through the same process. making me eat food that I didn't like. It made me throw up. My brother, since he was younger, didn't seem like he went through it as bad as I did. Since I was the oldest one, there was just something about my dad and me being the oldest one that they seemed like they leaned on the hardest. Now during this time, people found out that my dad was a police officer in school. My mother would buy our clothes for school, and she would lay our clothes out. I didn't have much choice what I wore to school. And everybody else was wearing clothes like blue jeans and, nice shirts and, different color socks, and they looked nice. Except my mom was, I'd go to school and I'd stick out like a sore thumb because I'd have on a pair of like red pants with a red flannel shirt with penny loafers that had white socks that stuck out. And so I was an oddball looking kid because of the way I dressed. I was very tall, very thin. And because of that, because of the fact that my dad was a policeman, I had no friends. And I mean none. And every day in school was hell. And when I say hell, I mean hell. They would laugh at me. They would throw things at me. They would hit me. They would knock me down. They would knock my books out of my hand. They would steal my lunch. They would steal my money. And they would make my life living hell. Every single day at school. Now, the older I got, the worse it got. Because back in the 70s, and today too, kids are cruel in school. They're very cruel. I hope things have gotten better. But back then in my day, they didn't have gun control. They didn't have a lot of control at all over students. And we had knives, we had it all at the school I went to. And there was many days where somebody would drag me into a corner and just beat the tar out of me and leave me lay there, bloody, and none of the teachers or anything would help me or do anything for me. Every once in a while one would come by, see me bleeding or have a black eye or something, and they'd take me down to the nurse, and the nurse would clean me up and send me on back. Wouldn't ask what was the matter, who was picking on me or nothing. And so my dad would get mad at me because I'd get beat up. And then when my dad got home from work, I'd get beat up by my dad because I lost a fight at school. Because he wanted the toughest child that he could possibly have. He wanted somebody that would stick up for himself. He was disappointed in me because I was so thin, and I guess I was just, to him, I was just a weak kid. My grades weren't good. I mean, how can you have good grades in school when you've got to worry about the pressure at home, the pressure at school, the pressure in the neighborhood, the jobs that you have to complete? My dad would get mad at me, and he would, there was so many times, so many things that he would do. I remember he would pick me up by my neck and he would throw me across the kitchen table, where I wouldn't even touch the table. I would just land on the floor in the corner, and his fierce eyes that were just full of rage would be over me, and he'd be hitting me, and my mom would be screaming at him, and it was a horrible, horrible existence. I didn't have much of a childhood. It just was terrible. Just horrible. There were so many times I got my face slammed up against walls. Once they hit my face on the faucet in the bathtub. I wasn't filling the water up right or something, and Mom just come in there and just smashed my face down on the spigot of the bathtub. You know, if I was working with my dad outside doing a project, and he would send me in the basement to go get a tool out of the toolbox, and I couldn't find it, he would come down there where I was, and because I couldn't find the tool, he'd be very angry with me, and I'd get hit or yelled at or both, punished somehow, called names. I was just so frightened all the time. I was frightened at home, I was frightened at school. I just a lot of times wished I were dead. I just wondered, you know, is it anything ever going to get any better? Ever. It don't seem like they ever did. You know, I hate to lay this kind of story on you, but there's a good ending to this, so stay with me. I know I'm missing a lot of things because I'm doing this by the Holy Spirit. I could literally sit here for days and tell you things that happened to me as a kid with my mother and father. I remember asking my dad and my mom about, I always knew I was adopted, who my real parents were. And I got told many times by my dad. I'd ask my mom would say, go ask your father. I was scared to death. I'd go ask my dad if he knew anything about my real parents. Well, it was none of my business. And I got told, you better just be glad you got a roof over your head, clothes on your back, and food in your belly. And he would be very mad at me for asking that question. Very angry. So I knew not to even bring it up anymore. But I always wondered. And one day, my dad started sending me to his room. Instead of beating on me, he'd send me to my room, and he'd shut the door, and I would stay in my room sometimes 2 or 3 days without being let out, especially if it was a weekend. You know, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday I was allowed to come back out of my room. But before it was like Sunday night, I was just praying that they would just leave me alone. Just leave me be in my room. I could be by myself and I wouldn't have anybody hitting me or yelling at me or nothing. Well, he would come and kick the door open, and then he would drag me out and beat me with a belt. And I would have just whelps all over me from him beating on me. And then he got to the point where he wouldn't speak to me at all. Months would go by, and my mother and father wouldn't even say hello to me. I'd come home from school, wouldn't even say hi, nothing. Did you do your jobs? That's about all I got. Finish your meal. Go do your homework. Go do this, go do that. That's the only communication I had. Plus, putting up with the everyday bullying at school. So anyway, I get to school one day, and the bus stop. I don't even want to go with the bus stop. Was another whole miserable story where they used to throw me in the bushes and things before the bus would come. Anyway, one day I got to school, and nobody was there to pick on me when I got off the bus. I couldn't understand it. I thought, well, maybe they found somebody else to pick on. And So I got into the school. Everybody's leaving me alone. I thought, boy, this is the best day I've had in a long time. The best day I could figure would be a day where nobody would speak to me or have any contact with me at all. That would be the perfect day for me. Well, I found out that the reason they hadn't been talking to me was because there was a guy in school that was there who wasn't supposed to be in the school, who was there supposedly to kill me, to literally put me out of my misery. And so I got very upset. I tried to talk to some of the teachers about it. And of course they played ignorant, but they didn't know anything about it. Not to worry about it, they said. So, anyway, I think it was along about 4th or 5th hour. I'm sitting in the classroom, and there's people waiting outside the classroom door. And they're kicking the door, and they're waiting for me to get out. And I knew that that was the guy they were talking about. So the bell rang. I was one of the first ones out the door. And I ran away from them as fast as I could down the hallway to get away from them. But they ran after me and they caught me. And they dragged me kicking and screaming into the stairwell. I was just praying. I just saying, God help me. Lord God help me, please. Because by now I've got a relationship with Jesus. From all the terrible things that had happened to me as a kid. And they got me in the back stairwell and they closed these metal doors. Boom! And they wrapped a chain around the door. And I mean this stairwell, it was 2-story schoolhouse. And I mean that stairwell was full of people. And they're all hollering, killing, killing, killing against me. And I look over and there's this kid. A lot bigger than me, a lot stronger than me, a lot older than me. And he looks like he's got a knife. And somebody came up from behind me and they shoved me into this guy. And I don't like violence. I don't. But at my crisis of belief, all I remember was that something took over inside of me. And it was all said and done. I was standing, and this kid was laying on the ground full of blood, where I had obviously beat him to a pulp. And it scared everybody. And the stairwell cleared out. They said, my God, he killed him. And I went over to him and I offered to help him up and to help him. Because I didn't even remember hitting the guy. And he just shoved me away. Like, get out, get out. And some girl came over and picked him up. And we moved the chain from the door. Took him, helped him walk down the hallway, took him to the nurse's office. Of course, I never got called to the principal's office or the nurse's office or anything. None of the teachers would come help. None of the students would come help me. I was all alone. And as I watched him go down that hallway, blood just dripping all the way down the hallway, it finally hit me that my only friend had been with me. Jesus was with me. The only friend I had been with me all along. It's hard to talk about. Things didn't get any better until after I finally moved out. I got old enough to move out. There came a time where my dad stopped hitting me because I told him that if he laid another finger on me, that I would kill him. I had to say that to my own adopted father to get him to stop the violence against me. One day, I'm living alone, and I'm looking for my adopted parents on the internet, and I'm having a little bit of I'm making headway. I find out that my dad's name was Troy Grubbs, and my mother's name is Dolores Grubbs, Grubbs, and that my real father had spent most of his life in prison. But I got up one morning, and I wasn't thinking about anything particular. Just woke up, and the crisis of belief came again. And I heard a voice say to me, "Kevin, I am your father. I am your only father." And that changed my whole life. It changed everything about me. It changed my outlook about who I was and whose I was. I realized that the whole time I was growing up, that the Lord had been with me the whole time. Even through the worst of times, He was there. He kept me alive. He kept me comforted. He did a lot of things for me that would not have happened, or I could not have done on my own without Him. Because, to tell you the truth, there should have been times where my real father and mother probably would have killed me. Maybe accidentally, but they would have. Now, in my adulthood, I found a very, very good woman. My wife, Janet. And I've got 2 very good stepchildren. And we don't have a lot of money. In fact, I make $1,100 a month on Social Security. I've had a heart attack a little over a month ago, but yet I have the drive to get out and work. Now, we're loggers. If you've ever seen any of our sermons, you know that I talk about our logging. And it's been over 100 degrees out here, and the humidity's been very high. And it's hard to breathe when you don't have a heart problem. But for me, it's triple hard because my breath would just leave me, and I have to take my little portable tank with me and breathe in it quite often, just to keep myself alive and breathing properly when we're out there doing logs. But the reason we have to do that is because there's 6 of us living here. 5, sometimes 6. Including our wonderful, wonderful bandit. We count him as a person too. He's a good boy. And I have to work. I have to help. Because the money I make isn't enough for us. And it's a very hardship on us. We have to work in this heat and do what we can just to have food for that day. The other day we got out there and we worked in the 100-degree heat. We put out a load of logs and there was 5 of us working. We worked all day and I figured it out. Each person made $9.20. That's enough for dinner for 6 people. And some sodas maybe. But I have Christ in me. That's one person and one thing I always have is the hope and glory of what is to come, people. I have reached the crisis of belief and I have made it through knowing the truth that this world is very temporary. No matter what you're going through, no matter what you have been through, no matter what you are going to go through, it's all going to be over with one day. And you have the hope of glory in your life. And when you need Jesus the most, He's going to be there. I could tell you so many stories, story after testimony, after testimony, after sermon. But the best thing I can do is stand here and offer up a piece of my life and tell you that from experience, I believe. And I became a preacher of the gospel because I so love Jesus. And I want you to know Him like I know Him. No matter how hard this world has been on you, no matter how hard life has been, no matter how little money you have, or how much you have, you've got to know that you have a place waiting for you in heaven. There is going to be a good ending to this. And I'm going to look back on this life and I'm going to understand why everything happened the way it did one day. But right now I just have to put my hope and understanding in the man. Not everybody lives a glorious life. But it's what you do with it, what you've learned from it, that matters. And I could be bitter, I could be angry at the world, but I'm not. I've learned to love people and appreciate what I have. Because I had so little before. And I'm asking you 2 things. Number 1, I'm not going to stand up here and beg you for money. You've heard this story. I know that one day somebody's going to come along who's going to make a financial difference in our life. And even if they don't, we're going to make it through this world. I'm about $6,000 or $7,000 in debt. I owe my brother $600 that I haven't been able to pay him back. And he expects to be paid back, believe me. And he's got money. He knows I don't have any. But he knows he wants his money. Here we are out here busting our butt. And one day we're going to run out of logs. And I don't know what we're going to do after that. But I know that God's got a plan for us. And we're going to go out there and we're going to work in the heat for our meal every day. That's all the money we can make. It's just enough to feed ourselves every day. It's hard to buy gasoline. It's hard to buy anything extra. And if something breaks down, right now my truck is sitting out there. The tags are out of it. I can't drive it because it's not legal. The engine light's always on. It's got 250,000 miles on it. It needs to be replaced 10 years ago. But it's all we got. And I know God's going to keep it running. And we're eventually going to get tags on it. But if you can make a difference in our life, imagine how blessed you'll be. A lot of people watch this and they'll say, you can do it. You can handle it. We probably can. I'm sick and tired of watching rich preachers on TV get up there and ask for money when they're worth millions, and they're taking your offerings and tithes and they're lining their pockets with it instead of doing what they should be doing with it. There's pastors out there on television that don't do nothing except care about money. This is the first time in a very long time I've ever brought up money. And you can look back at all of the sermons I've done. All of them. And you'll see I'm telling you the truth. And the second thing that I'm asking you for is I'm asking you to become that person who God can trust. That person that God will give prophecy to. That person that God will give the gift of healing to. That person that God will use to preach. He's given me all. I personally, if I had a prayer that I wish God would answer, is I would like to go out into the world and spread the gospel. Because I know that I've got a pretty good gift of preaching. And I would like to share prophecies. And I would lay hands on the sick and see them recovered. I got to go to North Ireland here a few years back. It was great. I went to several churches. I went to many people's homes. And I got to see a lot of healing. A lot of prophecies that came true while I was there. And I want to share that with you. But it's hard to do when I'm here in my living room talking to the camera, praying that you'll watch this. But the most important thing is, you got to call me and invite me. But the most important thing is you got to believe in Jesus first. And you got to put your bitterness aside. And you got to know that when you're put in an impossible situation that you don't think that you're going to make it through, know that you're going to make it. And it might be awfully rough on you, but you're going to get through it. Now I want to say this prayer. Stay with me because this is important. Father Jesus, I want to be one of your most trusted followers. I want to be the person that Kevin's talking about. I want to give up the bitterness and the anger that I have, knowing that you were the one that helped me get through it, that got me through it, and that I'll probably face more tests along the way. But I know that you're going to be there with me. I repent of my sins, Lord. And I'm coming back to you in these last days. And I'm going to give it all I got. Amen. Now listen. I got one more thing to say. Like I said in the beginning, this was a sermon that I didn't want to give. But I did it because the Lord told me to. Because somebody out there today needs to hear this. I didn't do this today for you to feel sorry for me. I made it through. But if you can help us financially, you'd be a huge blessing. Now, everybody knows somebody who's going through a problem. Don't turn your back on them. Go out there and see what you can do to help. Amen? Have a nice day. Bye.